2 now. It's the match between Wayne Ferreira and Todd Martin. This is BBC One. Now the news with Moira Stuart. It's 5:15.
The Americans laid an attack on Mogadishu in retaliation for the killing of 23 UN peacekeepers. The operation started in the Somali capital at dawn. The UN says they intend to disarm the whole country. Saddam Hussein sends a British man to jail for 8 years for straying into the country illegally. And a last-minute penalty gives the All Blacks victory in the first test. At least 2 civilians have died after United Nations troops in Somalia opened fire on demonstrators protesting against the American military strike on the capital, Mogadishu. The overnight attack, authorized by the UN, was intended to punish the local warlord, General Aidid. His forces are believed to have killed 23 Pakistani soldiers last weekend.
The operation began in the early hours with attack helicopters and aircraft flying low over Mogadishu. Tracers and explosions lit up the sky, and the retaliation long expected from the UN had finally arrived. First on the list of targets was the relay station for General Aidid's radio, which had been putting out inflammatory anti-UN material. Next, the weapons dumps where the Somali warlord had been building up his strength. One ammunition store, hit by a missile, continued to explode long after the attack was over. This morning, American soldiers took over what remained and surveyed the damage. What they found were weapons in large quantities. There were also armoured cars and multiple rocket launchers, all now firmly out of action. At the radio relay station, a number of Somalis were taken into custody for interrogation before release, all part of the UN's latest effort to bring peace to Somalia. This has been a military success, albeit against a much weaker enemy. But the real test for the UN now is to win and keep the hearts and minds of the Somali people while keeping up this hardline approach. The crowd of demonstrators who gathered outside UN headquarters this morning certainly came face to face with a hard line. Pakistani soldiers opened fire on the crowd. One man died instantly. One woman died later in hospital. Roger Hearing, BBC News, Mogadishu.
President Clinton used his weekly radio broadcast to denounce what he called the small but dangerous minority of Somalis who are still determined to provoke terror and chaos.
Last night's action was essential to send a clear message to the armed gangs, to protect the vast majority of Somalis who long for peace, to enhance the security of our forces still in Somalia, to hasten the day when they can safely return home, and to strengthen the effectiveness and the credibility of UN peacekeeping in Somalia and around the world.
A 23-year-old Briton, Simon Dunn, has been jailed for 8 years in Iraq for entering the country illegally. Mr. Dunn, who was working in Kuwait, was arrested 2 weeks ago at Qasr with a German who's received the same sentence.
Since the Gulf War, the Iraqis have claimed Qasr as their own. The 2 men were detained just 24 hours after the UN passed a resolution maintaining Kuwait's right to part of the area. Last year, 2 other Britons were given stiff sentences for illegal entry into Iraq. Paul Ryde is serving 7 years in prison, while Michael Wainwright from Yorkshire, detained while on a cycling holiday, is serving a 10-year sentence. MP Tam Dayel, who's visited both men in jail, says he doesn't believe they'll be released until the issue of sanctions against Iraq is discussed.
Oh, it's very unfortunate for the individual concerned, but sanctions are harsh. And if we're talking about harshness, they say that a whole generation of their children are suffering from what they believe to be the unjust UN sanctions.
The Foreign Office says Mr. Dunn's prison term is outrageous and has asked the Russians who represent British interests in Iraq to find out how he is. Clive Myrie, BBC News.
The UN commander in Bosnia, General Morion, has warned that UN forces may pull out if the present level of violence continues. 8 people died today when a Muslim funeral in Sarajevo was shelled by Serbs. And around Travnik, the remnants of a Muslim relief convoy are still trying to get through Croat roadblocks.
They are still providing no formal escort, but today British UN troops bowed to the inevitable and did their best to help the remains of the convoy through Croat territory. It's a huge task involving the rounding up of both lorries and drivers. In spite of the UN presence, there have been further sporadic attacks. But the British believe that their task has been eased by Muslim forces who've been renewing their push against the Croats.
There is a BIH attack going on in the area of Novi Travnik. And I think because of that attack, a lot of the army from this area may well have been pulled away to the front line. And that's meant the area's a lot quieter.
One of the places used to loot the lorries yesterday was a quarry in Vitez. Today, the vehicles are being rescued and prepared to complete the journey, though the provisions they carried, the whole point of the exercise, have gone. Throughout the area, the evidence remains of the violence of the last 2 days, violence which the UN was powerless to prevent and which has left lorries scattered around the countryside and a number of drivers still missing. Small wonder that the United Nations commander in Bosnia is considering the future of his force.
UNPROFOR can help, but only if we have the total support and confidence of all levels of the government and the military leadership. If this cannot be achieved, then UNPROFOR, with rage and sadness in its heart, will have no option but to withdraw.
But even as the general was speaking, the violence continued. A Muslim funeral in Sarajevo was hit by Serb artillery fire, 8 killed and 5 injured. They had been burying people who died in an earlier mortar attack. The killing is relentless. There is no end in sight. Justin Webb, BBC News, Bosnia.
The Queen's Birthday Honours List recognises the bravery of British servicemen in the former Yugoslavia. The list is the first since the Prime Minister promised a more broadly based system of awards.
More than 150 soldiers are honoured today. The most well-known, Lieutenant Colonel Bob Stewart, gets a DSO. Life peerages go to the violinist Yehudi Menuhin and the Governor of the Bank of England, Robin Lee Pemberton. The director and actor Richard Attenborough becomes a Lord too. The actress and presenter of Praise Be, Thora Hird, becomes a Dame.
I've been in it forever, you know, because I am 82 and I was carried on at 8 weeks old, so it's quite a long career, you know.
The Prime Minister's hand can be detected in the MBE for Harold Larwood, the fast bowler shunned by the cricketing establishment after the bodyline controversy 60 years ago. Speaking today from his home in Australia, the 89-year-old, who's now blind, recalled those events.
Oh, there's a bit of controversy, but it was nothing. It created a bit of interest in the cricket, and that's what they want these days. Someone to show a bit of interest.
Snooker player Stephen Hendry gets an MBE and actor David Jason an OBE. Polar explorer Ranulph Fiennes and his partner Dr. Michael Stroud get OBEs. This list has fewer civil service time servers than previous ones and more ordinary people, like Welsh community nurse Gwyneth Poacher. But it's the next list in the new year which will be closer to what John Major had in mind when he announced his reforms. That, for the first time, will include the choices of the public. So far, more than 10,000 nomination forms have been sent out. Jonathan Maitland, BBC News at Downing Street.
The British Lions have lost the first rugby union test to New Zealand. In a very close game, a last-minute penalty gave the All Blacks victory by 20 points to 18.
The start of an eagerly anticipated test series produced only one controversial try. The game was just 88 seconds old when the All Blacks centre Frank Bunce went over, but later the Lions winger Ian Evans claimed he was disputing possession with Bunce and the try shouldn't have been allowed. From that point on, the game was dominated by the goal kickers. This was Gavin Hastings' third successful kick of the first half. And this, his sixth penalty of the match, put the Lions 18-17 ahead with just 8 minutes to go. With less than a minute remaining though, Dean Richards was penalised at a ruck. Again, the Lions were unhappy with the referee's decision, but Grant Fox kicked the penalty. 20-18 and first blood to the All Blacks. Duncan Jones, BBC News.
And that's it for now. There's news and sport on BBC Two at 10 to 7.
Michael Fairbairn puts the work of the Parliamentary Select Committees under scrutiny at 6:20 on BBC Two, with guests including Paddy Ashdown and Geoffrey Archer.
Good evening. A very different day tomorrow as that area of low pressure pulls away and the sun comes back. Mind you, it is going to introduce some quite strong northerly winds, especially along the east coast, fairly windy in the west country as well. So not ideal conditions if you're thinking of taking out a small boat. Quite a swirl of cloud on the latest satellite picture around that area of low pressure. In fact, we still have a fair number of showers, especially across the southern half of the country. 1 or 2 thunderstorms around at the moment. They'll rumble on into the evening, but it's going to be a fine end to the day, I think, in many northern parts. And during the rest of the evening and through the night, most of those showers will die away. The cloud will tend to thin and break. 1 or 2 showers, I think, continuing, though, in East Anglia and the extreme southeast. And with those clearing skies, if you get a little bit of shelter in parts of Scotland, you could actually just about get a touch of ground frost. And it certainly will be a chilly night in the north of Scotland, whereas those temperatures will hold up very nicely further to the south. And then tomorrow, well, maybe some cloud and a few spots of rain or lightish showers to begin with in the southeast. Might be the odd shower throughout the day, I think, but it is going to be a much brighter day everywhere. Most parts of the country are going to have a reasonable amount of sunshine, and it will, as I say, be dry. It will be breezy down that eastern coast, and that wind will hold the temperatures down along that coast there, about 13 degrees or so. Elsewhere, not too bad if you can get out of the wind and in the sun, and that's all.